This is Praying for Superpowers,
a podcast about the deeper meanings, messages, and intricacies hidden within nerd culture. I'm Peter Jordahl.
And I'm Trever Sharon, and today we are talking about the differences, the similarities, what we love and what we dislike about The Legend of Korra
and Avatar: The Last Airbender.
So, Peter, I think maybe we should start with you sharing your experience with Avatar, because it's much more than the experience I have.
Which I think is important for the purpose of this show, to talk about the fact that I've probably watched Avatar: The Last Airbender all the way through, at least a dozen times, probably more than a dozen times. And I've watched Korra through 3 or 4 times. And it's not because I love one more than the other, but, you know, one is much older than the other, and I watched that one when it came out. I got up every Saturday morning, or I stayed up every Friday night, whatever day of the week it was. You, however, Trevor, you are on season 3, episode 1 of ATLA, and season 3, episode
9
of Korra. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and it's kind of a reverse where I didn't have access to watch Avatar when I was a kid. And because we just didn't have cable, I just didn't watch TV as a kid. And so now that it's out on Netflix, I'm actually able to access it. And so I'm in an interesting spot because we've decided that we're going to watch Avatar together only for my first run through, which I'm really enjoying because you have so many insights that I would have missed entirely, but that I'm allowed to binge Korra. And so I really enjoy Korra because I'm able to just binge it, and it's definitely Avatar. But I wouldn't say that I have a preference of either or, but I like them for very different reasons.
I think that is normally when someone says like that they don't like Korra or they don't like ATLA, but they like the other one, it's because of these differences. And if you grew up on The Last Airbender, you are probably going to have a problem with The Legend of Korra. I don't know, I think just a lot of fans, I feel like, are stuck in that spot.
Yeah. Well, and even growing up, I didn't watch it, but of course I heard about it. I heard about Avatar, about all the Nick shows. And then I heard about Korra when it came out. And I remember, my impression just from hearsay was that Avatar was the classic and Korra was where they ruined everything. And I think most of the ruining that everybody was talking about was a switch that happens beyond where I'm at right now, where Korra's sexuality appears to change pretty drastically. And so that's really what stuck in my head as what Korra was going to be.
I think it ruined it for a specific type of person, and I think I'll freely admit I was that type of person. And mostly the reason I didn't like it is because it seemed out of the blue, and I do not like any political statement that comes out of the blue. If it's built into the story, I can accept it as part of the story and enjoy it. Now, on my recent rewatch, I did see those hints of what I knew was coming throughout seasons 3 and 4, and knowing that the reason that didn't happen in seasons 1 and 2, although the creators were planning on it, is because they were on Nick, and they moved from Nickelodeon on TV to online, and then I believe they even left Nick online for the last season. So because that's what they wanted to do with the character. So that being said, I don't think that was the main reason that people were bothered.
No, I think that actually we stumbled upon it in our conversation last week.
I think what it comes down to is we were talking and you said what's really insightful, and I don't think I would have ever seen it because I grew up on the original show. And you talked about how the characters in ATLA are deep, complex characters. And the characters in Korra are very shallow level characters with not a ton of arc or depth or internal conflict.
Yeah, in ATLA, the storyline remains pretty static and the characters are very dynamic. And it's flipped in Korra where the characters are for the most part static. I'm on, season 3, episode 9 of Korra, and Korra as a character does not seem to have done much changing. But the world around her has changed in a very dynamic way. And in Avatar, I'm on season 3, episode 1, and it feels like Aang has changed so much, but the storyline has remained essentially the same. He has to bring peace to this world and has to learn to master all of the bendings, and that's the story.
Yeah, and I think I don't want you to hear that we're ragging on Korra or that we're saying one is better than the other, because that's not what we're doing. But if we're looking at just the characters, let's just start at just the story. Mm-hmm. The basic premise of The Last Airbender is so simple. It's war. There's an aggressor, and there are people that have been invaded. What is the Avatar's purpose? End war. Pretty simple thing. Not in execution, but in understanding. Mm-hmm. And in book 1, water, Aang has to master the element water and journey to the Northern Water Tribe. In book 2, earth, he has to master earthbending and travel to the Earth Kingdom capital, Ba Sing Se. And in book 3, fire, he has to master fire and travel to the Fire Nation capital. Okay, that's there's not extra depth in the story, and
it's very rich. So simple does not mean unintelligent or lacking richness. It just means that it doesn't take a whole lot of time to be able to explain it or catch up on it or to tell that story. And I think the benefit that I see in Avatar is that it really gives a really clean canvas on which the characters can be explored and change and show a lot of vibrance.
I agree. And I want to come back to the characters in The Last Airbender and talk about the story overall in Korra real quick. Yeah. I say real quick. We honestly don't have enough time to get into it because it's such a deep story. So I'm going to do the best that I can in 1 or 2 sentences to summarize each book.
Oh, okay.
So in book 1, air, Korra's trying to master the element of air. But it's more than that.
Yeah.
It's hard. Okay. There is some character development for her in this season. It's her learning to be the leaf, to move with the wind, to travel through the floating gates and not burn them to cinders in an explosive, angry tirade. And that scene, which Trevor, you said, that typifies her as a character.
Oh yeah, that's the perfect explanation of, I think, the entire series of Legend of Korra.
Okay, and we talked. Oh man, we're getting off track, but we talked about how in season 1 there's a little bit of the Western anime stylization with slide whistles and where they suddenly change animation style to be almost a chibi variant, which happened somewhat frequently in The Last Airbender. And then after season 1 of Korra, doesn't really happen anymore.
No, and you have a lot of still frames of characters too.
Yes. Well, that's because the animation studio changed in book 2. Wait till you get back into the end of book 3 and book 4. It gets better. So book 1 is about her learning to airbend, and then the idea of her understanding the importance of equality and giving voice to the marginalized non-benders of the world while dealing with the past mistakes of others and the current mistakes of herself and others. And I could keep going. There's
and
more.
Already in chapter 1, you have used more words than you used to explain all of Avatar: The Last Airbender. And
it just keeps going. Book 2, Spirits, is understanding herself and learning justice and picking a side, and
the world changes from disconnected to connected, and
what is more important, tradition or family or peace or
and
justice.
Yet none of this has been Korra as a character growing. She's discovering things as she goes along, but I would argue that she's discovering more about the world around her and the world of the Avatar as a person than she is growing as a person or changing or becoming somebody better or different than she was in season 1.
And I love that you say that, not knowing what's coming in book 4.
I'm a little blind.
Because when we get to book 4, you're going to listen back to this episode and be like, what? I can't believe, like, you're almost predicting in a crazy way what's happening in book 4.
Oh, interesting. And so I'm not going to go back and be like, oh, Trevor, you idiot.
No, it's going to flow real well. I promise.
Interesting.
But what's interesting is the overarching thought behind all of Korra is that people will always try to tell you who you should be, what you should do, and why you should do it. Mm-hmm. And it is Korra battling that in different ways through all 4 books.
Yeah.
You are the Avatar. You are an Airbender. You have to be a peacekeeper. You can't be a warrior. You have to be a woman. Like all these specific things. In every episode, nearly, someone is trying to control her destiny.
Yeah.
And that is just, and that's the world in general. But now let's look at the characters and compare. Well, yeah. I want to talk about 3 and 4 real quick.
Okay.
Books 3 and 4. In book 3, it's tradition should not hold power over free will, goodness, wisdom, race, culture, and age cannot predict morality, right? So we have really wise people, really strong people from different races, different genders, and yet the Red Lotus is this awful, evil group of people who seek just basically chaos, which they perceive as the natural order of things. And then we look at book 4, which the general idea behind is absolute power corrupts absolutely. And trauma is more than a physical wound.
Which is true in life as in the show.
It is. I cannot wait for you as a counselor to watch season 4. The way they handle PTSD is incredible. And I'm excited really for you to see it. So let's dive into the characters. And I want to start with the original show, ATLA. And I want to talk about the beautiful balancing of the elements, this yin, yang, that happens between our 4 main characters. So we have Aang, Katara, Sokka, and Zuko. And if we look at Aang and Zuko as opposites, being the main protagonist and the main antagonist, and also in general temperament, they're very opposite. In one is the shortest character out of these 4, the other is the tallest. And the way they were raised, Zuko, his whole character is his lineage, his who he is the son of, who he is the son of for his father is a major thing. And then there's a whole comic book about who he is who his mother is, because it becomes a running joke in the show. And they even tease that in season 1 of Korra. And, they have, and Aang never even knew his parents because he was raised by monks, so it's this opposites thing that is beautifully crafted, because Aang's character arc focuses on him accepting his destiny while remaining true to his beliefs, while Zuko's character arc focuses on accepting his destiny while changing his beliefs. And for each of them, it's a point of tension. For Aang, the tension is that his destiny to be the Avatar requires him to do something that goes drastically against his beliefs. And Trevor, you haven't seen this yet. It's season 3 that you really get into the rest of this arc. So I'm excited to see what you think of that. And then you look at Zuko and you see he's accepting his destiny as Fire Lord while he's changing his beliefs. And the moments where his beliefs change are incredible moments. I don't know. I think they're my favorite part of the original series. Just his character arc in season 3 is beautiful. And so they're Trevor, you used a term while we were preparing. What was it? Do you remember?
They're foils of each other. So we have Aang and Zuko are a foil of each other, which just means, literally, one character, they kind of oppose each other, but in opposing each other, they bring out some characteristics of the other. and they allow us to see the other characters in different lights. And so, and it, you know, ties into this idea that we're better in relationship. We're able to draw things out. We're able to see more about who Zuko is because we know Aang, and vice versa, because they do oppose and foil each other. And what's interesting when we were preparing was that Sokka and Katara, they are foils of each other as well.
Yeah, and this, I think, is something that is so beautiful, because a lot of times I think siblings are done wrong in TV shows and movies. I don't know what it is. I never feel like it's done super well in a lot of shows. Now, maybe that's just because I don't watch the best shows. I don't know.
Yeah, but I agree with you, and we have very different sibling relationships.
That's true.
And I feel like most of the time shows and movies err on this side of like almost like a romantic friendship between siblings, where I mean romantic as in like it's flowery, it's really intimate and close and all of this, and
or the complete opposite.
Oh, right. Yeah. Or the complete opposite. And I feel like most of the people that I know have a very middle ground relationship with siblings.
And that's what Katara and Sokka's relationship is. It's awesome to see this brother-sister relationship of opposites attract and opposites cause intense, visceral reactions of rage. But like, they're still siblings, so they still love each other.
Yeah.
And again, their character arcs are they're foiled together. They're a juxtaposed of challenging tradition in different ways. Katara challenges tradition both literally and metaphorically by fitting every mold except her gender. She's powerful. She's strong. She gives good speeches. She is controlling. She is caring. She's everything that a male leader in this society is expected to be, but she's a woman. And then we look at Sokka, and he's holding to tradition, trying to keep the tradition while breaking every mold but his gender. You know, and Trevor, you're not here yet, but when he meets Pien Dao, they kind of have a whole episode about Sokka where we see him go through basically everything he's gone through since season 1, kind of again in kind of a fast-paced way, in a training montage sort of way, where, you know, he's not the strong warrior, he's not the fierce combatant, he's not the public speaker, you know, all these different things that are expected of a male leader like his father. But at the same time, he is a man who is leading so well in the way that he does. And it's a beautiful back and forth of, I don't know, basically challenging traditional gender roles in a way that I didn't even notice until I took time to notice.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've enjoyed most about being able to watch through Avatar the first time with you is that as we're watching, you're pointing out things that I would have never picked up on before, like Momo being Aang's mentor, reincarnate, and these different aspects of like even how much of Zuko's face is in shadow, and the relationship between the different characters. There's such a richness, or even Uncle Iroh's alcohol problem. That is probably still my favorite thing that you've told me about.
Yeah, so I've never seen this corroborated. I haven't seen this anywhere else, but in watching season 1, it seems obvious to me that Iroh, when he's eating and drinking tea, it's like he was initially meant to be a drunk. And it fits so well with his character of his son dying and losing his throne and losing a war and being banished and all this stuff. Of course he would be a drunkard. And I'm sure if that was an idea, that Nickelodeon was like, nah, you can't have a drunk uncle as a main character.
So watching through Avatar: The Last Airbender and hearing about these different intricacies of the characters has been really, really enjoyable. And it has opened my eyes to be able to think in a different way in approaching Korra. And I've been really struck with this I'm sure there's more than what I'm seeing. And also, I'm not seeing very much in the way of dynamic character growth and change.
Yeah. What have you seen? Yeah, I want to know, what have you seen in Korra so far? Seasons 1 and 2 and half of season 3.
Yeah, so like I said, I think that scene early on in Korra where she's at the air temple and she has to work through the fans as if she's a leaf, and instead she destroys them. I think that portrays the character very well, if she's a bull in a china shop a lot of the time. And the main thing that started me thinking about this was that I've really been like, there's been so many moments in Avatar: The Last Airbender where my jaw drops when Aang does something and I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Because I love when powers are used in like intriguing and interesting and clever ways. Yeah. And I feel like Korra has yet to really do that in a way that wows or impresses me.
I'll be honest, Trevor, it doesn't happen.
Bummer.
There's never a moment where Korra does something that I'm like, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, like, it's always very simple, and it's not even very powerful. Like, yes, she's powerful, but Aang always seemed more powerful.
Yeah, and I think, so I've seen a couple different things on this online, and one of the things that I've seen is that her power is lessened because she is the last avatar in the cycle of avatars, right? It is harmonic convergence. And so all of the past avatars, before she was even going to like lose that connection, she was already losing that power.
Interesting.
And
I can see that. I mean, it seems like a walk around, but I think that from an outside perspective, I've actually appreciated how straightforward Korra is and how straightforward the characters are, because there isn't much change. Like, it doesn't feel like Korra in episode 9 of season 3 is much different than Korra episode 1 of season 1. She's still going through some of the same struggles, trying to get under the thumb of authority and trying to figure out who she is as the Avatar. Like, those questions I don't think have really changed in any dramatic fashion at all.
Right.
And her party, her adventuring party, also seems to have not gone through very much change. Like, there hasn't been much in the way of like visible effects of trauma or a character completely changing in the way that they behave. Like, even who's the female in Korra? Asami early on finds out that her dad is a traitor to everything that she believed in and seems rather unfazed by that transition. There's a little bit of struggle with it, but, you know, even from her first revelation, she immediately, you know, steps into who she is for the rest of the series. What I've appreciated about that is, you know, because normally that might be really disappointing, but I think in Korra it's not, because the story itself is so complex and has so many layers that if the characters in Korra were as complex as they are in Avatar: The Last Airbender, I would feel really, really lost.
And it wouldn't be a kids show. It's already barely a kids show as Korra.
Right.
But it would definitely, I mean, kids would just be totally lost.
Totally. And like, granted, kids have an amazing ability to keep up with storylines, but so much of it would go over their heads if I have to keep track of dynamic character growth and an ever increasingly dynamic storyline. I like I said with Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's really nice to have this soft canvas on which to put your characters. And I think Korra is the reverse of that, where it's very soft caricatures on top of a very complex landscape portrait on the canvas.
I mean, and I think that is, I mean, that right there, that statement, that's the tagline, right? That is what we're looking at. We're looking at two shows done, like, I like to think of it like paintings, like two masterwork paintings, but one of those paintings is like a blurry background with incredibly detailed figures. And the other one is this really beautifully detailed landscape, and all the characters are just kind of little blobs in the
They're
foreground.
set pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
set pieces that the world revolves around.
Yeah, and in recent months, I've started to get really heavily into photography and finding my passion for that again. And I've realized that I really love doing portrait photography where the background is very blurry and I can see a lot of detail in the character, in the person, in the face. But I also have a great amount of respect for the landscape photographers who have characters that, you know, kind of just show the size and the complexity and the vastness of what they're taking pictures of, because I feel like I can't do that very well. And it does take skill to do either one. So it's not that one is of more value than the other. I think that it's just a different way of looking at the world, and having it, you know, in a show that is all about balance in both series, it's important to have balance between what we're focusing on and what's just there to provide some value to what we want you to focus on.
And you said both the words balance and value, and all I can do with that is think about book 4 balance and how the depth of character that you think would be too much, along with the depth of story. Yeah, that's exactly what book 4 is. It is the character developing arc of this series.
Interesting.
And it's really well done, and they balance it well because you've gotten used to things.
Yeah.
You know, you've gone through 3 seasons of this. And then when you talk about value, as an artistic term, you know, value is how much like black or white is in the color, how dark or light it is. And the color palette used in Korra is so much significantly darker. Because they're in a city, you know, they're not flying over landscapes. And as I'm thinking about it, the amount of work put into general landscapes in ATLA is minimal. And the amount of work put into the city, the design, the mapping, the buildings, and like the functioning cars and all the
backgrounds.
The backgrounds, it's way more. And how even how we were talking about it being an art piece, as an art piece, the show follows its own design in that way. And I love that. Yeah. Because it fits so well.
Yeah. And I've been really impressed with Avatar. I think that, you know, there are, okay, let's be honest. I've seen The Office this more times than you've seen Avatar. And I can give you the lowdown on all of the different things that are happening and the fan theories and all of that. But it lacks the richness in storytelling and the meaning to existence as a human. Like, it does have a lot of statements about the world and office life and the way that corporate policy works and stuff like that, obviously. But it is not as rich or as meaningful as the Avatar's storyline is and the purpose behind it. And so it's really fun to be able to engage in something as an adult and be able to see those themes that have real significance to life as an adult, that I definitely would have missed as a kid.
Yeah. I think that's why the show has aged so well, is that richness that you were talking about. And I want to move on to 2 more topics. I want to finish because I want to give due diligence and justice to the characters. You said something good about Mako, the firebender from Korra.
Yeah, I think Mako is probably the most dynamic in Korra, because he seems to have a lot of internal turmoil and struggle of dating the Avatar, not dating the Avatar, being friends with the Avatar, and themes of, you know, relationships, and then duty over passion. How do I maintain being a cop when I have all these things happening in my world that I feel like are unjust? How do I work within a system? And when do I need to work outside of that system? Like, he seems to have more challenges and dynamic internally than Bolin does as he's finding stardom.
Is so funny to me because Bolin, if we didn't have Bolin, Mako would be just plain annoying.
Honestly. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I don't think he would
a pain in the butt.
But because he has a pain in the butt younger brother who he has had to take care of, his character makes sense. And it becomes a useful character because we have Bolin as the comic relief. And we talked about this yesterday. I'm going to say it again. All the characters are kind of reincarnations of the previous Team Avatar, right? We have the non-bender who uses technology, Sokka and Asami. We have the Avatar, Aang and Korra. We have the waterbender, and Katara. We have Katara, and we have Korra kind of fills that role as well. And then her opposite, Mako, kind of fills that role as well. Mm-hmm. And then we have Bolin. Bolin is not a reincarnation of Toph, as you might think. Because in fact, Bolin is the recharacterization of Appa. And his fire ferret is Momo. And so that is, I think, the takeaway. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but honestly, Bolin, seasons 1 through 3, has almost no purpose beyond, ironically, carrying the team, but he carries them with his enthusiasm, his getting into trouble and needing to be rescued. He is this plot piece that is so necessary. Without, things wouldn't happen, but if you look at him directly, there's not much there. And that's exactly what Appa was.
Yep.
And so we have to talk about Toph, because we can't forget Toph. If you go on YouTube and you type Toph Beifong, Beauty in Simplicity, you'll find a great YouTube video. I don't know who put it up there, but it is an awesome video about how the simplistic idealism of a 12-year-old who is disabled and yet highly enabled with superpowers, she deserves to be the simple out of the 5 of them. And then if we look into Korra, we look at the only lineage that continues in such a way, and it is her family, the Beifong. So we have Lin Beifong and her sister Sue, and that family dynamic. And we also can look at Aang and Katara's family, Tenzin, Bumi, and Kaya. Those two families, the Beifongs and Aang and Katara's families, they are the deep characters of this show. Looking at season, even in season 1, but especially seasons 2, 3, and 4, all of that character depth is in the characters, the Beifongs, and I guess Aang and Katara didn't have a last name, so Tenzin and his family. And I love looking at that because they're on screen so much less that the depth can't be as great. But the amount that they're on screen and the depth that they have is equal to, like, per capita as the original Team Avatar. And I think that is what saved the show for me, with being frustrated with Korra's kind of bullheaded, rash nature, and the fact that the rest of Team Avatar kind of seemed like tag-along plot pieces. And then we have Aang's kids and Toph's kids. Yeah. And what I mentioned at the beginning of the episode is what really killed the show for people. And I think it's that in season 2, we find out Aang was not really a great father. And then Korra loses her connection with the past avatars.
Yeah, so we lose Aang.
We lose Aang. So all the people who loved ATLA now have, not only do they have nothing to hold to, but the thing that they loved has been besmirched.
And erased.
And erased, yeah. So it's kind of this, like, it's almost offensive. But it's beautiful in the sense that, like, well, of course, the 12-year-old who was forced to save the world and survive the genocide of his people is gonna be a poor dad. Like,
right. Well, and Peter, as you're talking, I was thinking we did an episode a while ago on Ms. Marvel, or Captain Marvel, that one, Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
And a lot of the pushback against Captain Marvel as a character was that she just felt like a brick She didn't feel like she changed much. She didn't feel like she had much emotion. She just like, she was, and that was it. And it strikes me as somewhat similar to how people view Korra, and, you know, some truth to that for sure. That she is, she doesn't change much. She's just there. And so to have a character with such richness and depth and change and affection and these like really funny animation styles that are very endearing, and then go to something that is very plain and very simplistic
with
and
dark and gritty tones,
and have the thing that we fell in love with, the person we fell in love with, besmirched and erased. I don't blame anyone for feeling like it was such a turn away from what they loved, that they didn't feel like they wanted to invest. And I'm kind of grateful that I'm watching the series the way that I am, because it allows me to appreciate both of them in a way that I know for a fact that I would not have been able to if I had grown up watching the shows.
Well, I'm glad that you can do that. I can't, but I can hear everything you say, and I can get that joy out of it. Now, the last time I watched Korra, I skipped season 2 almost completely, and then I went back and rewatched it after finishing 3 and 4, because the loss of Aang and Katara and Sokka as characters was just, it was too much. Yeah. Those characters were so important to me growing up. So I love hearing that you're like, I have such an appreciation viewing it. You know, you're viewing them at the same time.
Well, and I understand it too. I understand what you're talking about, because again, my show that I have expertise in is The Office, and I stop watching as soon as Michael proposes to Holly, because it marks the end of Michael Scott in The Office. And so, you know, and that I have such love for that character and such affection for his presentation, that what you're saying about Aang makes perfect sense. That even just the metaphoric or the figurative loss, the sentimental spiritual loss of this character that you love is enough to mean that I just don't want to go any further, because it feels like it should be over now. This is the end of this character that meant so much to the story. And so the story itself has ended for me.
And I think that right there, more than anything else, is why the first show is called Avatar: The Last Airbender, and the second show is just called The Legend of Korra. It should have been called Avatar: The Legend of Korra, because she is the next Avatar. That is a part of who she is. Now, you might say that James Cameron having a movie called Avatar coming out around this time probably threw a wrench in their naming of things. But I'll be honest and say they got rid of who we knew as the Avatar. And I think the problem that we're experiencing now is, as we talk about it, the losing Michael Scott, the losing Aang, is exactly what the problem is for Korra in the world she lives in. Mm-hmm. Everyone is comparing her whole life to Aang, to Roku, to Kyoshi. And we don't see that, because we meet her when she's like 4, and then we meet her again when she's 16, and we don't see all of this weight that's on her. We see it occasionally, but we're so focused on the story that we don't see the pressures on her in that specific way. And it's so interesting to see how we have, by the creators of the show, been put in the same place as the protagonist by how they structured the death and erasing of the character we loved growing up.
Yeah. Well, and okay, I'm sorry, I have to say this just because I have strong feelings about this. I think we can both agree that The Legend of Korra is a more valuable Avatar than James Cameron's movie.
100%. I don't think there's a single person on the planet that would argue that. Mostly because I think people
I've met some.
Well, here's the thing, though. I think the people that would argue for James Cameron's Avatar are not well-bred enough people to also have watched The Legend of Korra.
And probably are not listening to us right now anyways.
Probably not.
Well, Peter, I'm sure that we'll have several more episodes about Avatar and The Legend of Korra as we continue to watch this, but I'm glad to be back in the podcasting seat with you, and really, really happy that I get to watch this show with you, because it feels like we get to do some of childhood together as well, which is fun. But yeah, I'm really enjoying all of this.
I'm glad. I'm enjoying it too, and I can't wait for our next episode about Avatar and Korra when we dissect season 4. Once you finish Korra, you're a licensed counselor, and we're gonna tear season 4 apart, looking at everything good and everything bad they did. And I hope you are excited as I am.
I am. Peter, do you want to close this out by talking about a few things that we want our listeners to know about?
Yeah, so if you like this episode of the podcast, thank you for listening. You can check us out on YouTube, where we have lots of videos and other episodes of this podcast uploaded in video format, as well as you can head to our website, ogrids.org, to see what our creators are up to and learn about who we are and why we do what we do. Make sure you keep an eye out for our Patreon, so you can join us and support us that way if you feel like that's something you want to give to. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and just be comfortable with your nerdiness.